She was abandoned in the snow on Christmas Eve until a CEO said, "Come with me, I'll protect you." Hello, dear listeners. Before we begin this beautiful story of love and hope, tell me, where are you listening from today? Leave it in the comments. I love knowing where all the hearts that follow this channel are tuning in from. Each message from you inspires me to keep telling stories that touch the soul. Now then, let's begin today's story. The cold was a living thing. It had teeth, and those teeth were sinking into Paige Morgan's skin, through her soaked coat, through her thin sweater, straight down to the bone. She sat on the curb in front of Riverside Station, her knees pulled tight against her chest, trying to trap what little warmth her body still held. It was 11 at night. Christmas Eve. The snow fell in thick, heavy curtains, transforming the world into a silent, suffocating blur of white. Everyone was gone. The last train had departed 20 minutes ago, carrying with it the final rush of travelers heading home to lit trees and warm embraces, to families, to love, to the kind of belonging Paige had spent most of her life watching from a distance. Her phone was dead, a useless black rectangle in her pocket. Her wallet was gone, stolen 2 hours earlier on the subway by hands she never even saw. Just a bump, a jostle in the crowd, and then emptiness where security used to be. And Marcus, her boyfriend of 2 years, the man who had promised, absolutely promised, to pick her up from the station. He hadn't come. 17 calls from the payphone inside the station, 17 trips to voicemail. His voice, casual and recorded, telling her to leave a message. She had stopped leaving messages after the 9th call. Paige wrapped her arms tighter around her knees, her fingers so numb now they barely registered as part of her body. Her breath came out in short, visible puffs that disappeared into the falling snow. She could feel her body starting to shake, violent tremors she couldn't control. A man in a thick winter coat hurried past her, his eyes sliding over her as if she were part of the architecture. A woman followed, heels clicking fast, phone pressed to her ear, laughing about something warm and far away. No one stopped. No one looked twice at the girl freezing on the curb. For the first time in years, Paige let herself cry. The tears were hot against her frozen cheeks, a strange contrast that lasted only seconds before they too turned cold. Then colder, then frozen, tiny tracks of ice on her skin. 3 hours ago, she had been on the train from Millbrook, coming back from visiting her grandmother, her only family, the woman who had raised her after Paige's mother died when she was 7. Eleanor had been so pale in that hospital bed, her hands thin as paper, her breathing shallow. But she had smiled when Paige walked in, that same smile that had greeted Paige every day after school, every scraped knee, every broken heart. "You should go back to the city, sweetheart," Eleanor had insisted, her voice weak but firm. "Go spend Christmas with Marcus. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to celebrate." Paige hadn't had the heart to tell her the truth, that Marcus barely remembered important dates, that he made her feel lonelier when she was with him than when she was alone, that she wasn't even sure he loved her, or if she was just convenient, easy, there. But Eleanor had looked so fragile, so hopeful, that Paige had simply smiled and promised to be happy. Now, sitting in the snow, her body shaking so hard her teeth chattered, Paige wondered if anyone would notice if she just disappeared, if she simply stopped moving and let the cold do its work. Another statistic, another tragedy buried in the back pages of the newspaper. Her coat was soaked through, useless. Her fingers had gone from numb to a strange, distant ache. She knew distantly that this was dangerous, that she needed to move, find shelter, call someone. But who? Marcus wasn't coming. Eleanor was too sick, too far away. And Paige didn't have friends. Not real ones. Just co-workers who smiled at her during shifts and forgot her name the moment she clocked out. The emotional exhaustion was heavier than the physical cold. It pressed down on her chest, making each breath harder than the last. She was so tired, so deeply, endlessly tired. Maybe she could just rest here, just for a moment, just until the shaking stopped. Her eyes started to drift closed, and then she heard it, the low, steady purr of an engine. Paige forced her eyes open, her vision blurred from cold and tears. A car was pulling up to the curb. Not just any car. A sleek black sedan, the kind she only saw in movies, the kind that cost more than she would make in 5 years. The engine cut off. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit under a wool coat that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. Snow was already gathering in his dark hair, dusting his shoulders. He stood there for a moment, looking around the empty station, his expression unreadable. Then his eyes found her. They were gray, storm cloud gray, the kind of gray that saw everything. For 3 heartbeats, they simply stared at each other across the falling snow. Paige watched as his eyes narrowed, taking in the scene. The girl on the curb, the soaked coat, the empty station. The snow accumulating around her like a burial shroud. His jaw tightened. He moved toward her, his footsteps crunching in the fresh snow, and she could see the exact moment genuine alarm crossed his features. "Are you all right?" His voice was deep, rough with concern that sounded real. Paige tried to answer. Her mouth opened, but her teeth were chattering so violently that the words came out broken, shattered. "I'm waiting for someone." It was a pathetic lie. They both knew it. The man's eyes flicked to the empty parking lot, to the snow that was now several inches deep and still falling. "How long have you been out here?" She didn't answer, couldn't answer. He stepped closer, and she saw his expression shift from concern to something sharper. Fear. "Your hands are blue." It wasn't a question. It was a diagnosis delivered with the kind of certainty that came from knowledge. "You're going into hypothermia." Before she could protest, he was already shrugging out of his coat. The expensive wool coat that probably cost thousands. He draped it over her shoulders, and the warmth that clung to the fabric hit her like a physical force. Paige almost sobbed with relief. The heat was so intense, so unexpected, that it hurt. Her frozen skin burning as blood rushed back to the surface. "Come with me." It wasn't a request. It was a command wrapped in gentleness, firm but not harsh. "I'll protect you." Paige knew she shouldn't. Every safety rule her grandmother had ever taught her screamed in her head. Don't get in cars with strangers. Don't trust men you don't know. Don't be stupid. But as she looked up at those gray eyes, eyes that actually saw her, eyes that held real concern instead of the empty sliding past that everyone else had given her tonight, something inside her chest cracked. Or maybe it healed. She didn't know. "I don't..." Her voice was barely a whisper, her throat raw from cold. "I don't know you." The man crouched down so they were eye level. Up close, she could see the sharp lines of his face, the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw, the snow gathering on his eyelashes. He extended his hand. "Henry Renford." His voice was steady, calm. "And you're freezing to death on Christmas Eve. We can do formal introductions after I make sure you keep all your fingers." There was the faintest hint of dry humor in his tone, but the worry underneath was absolute and unquestionable. Paige looked at his outstretched hand, strong, steady, offering salvation. She looked back at the empty station behind her, the place where Marcus had never come, the place where she had almost let herself disappear. She thought about dying alone in the cold, and she made the most impulsive decision of her entire life. She took his hand. His grip was warm, solid, real. He helped her to her feet, keeping a firm hold on her arm when her legs nearly gave out beneath her. The world tilted, and she felt his other hand steady her back. "Paige." Her voice was barely audible, but he heard it. "My name is Paige." "All right, Paige." Henry guided her toward the car, his movements gentle but purposeful. "Let's get you out of the cold." He opened the passenger door, and heat rushed out to greet her. The interior of the car was warm, leather seats soft beneath her as she half collapsed into them. Henry leaned across her to buckle her seatbelt, his movements efficient, careful. Then he was in the driver's seat, pulling away from the curb, leaving the empty station behind. Paige turned to look out the back window, watching the place where she had almost died grow smaller in the distance. Marcus had never come, but someone had, and somehow, impossibly, that changed everything. Paige was shaking so violently her teeth chattered in a frantic rhythm. She sat in the heated leather seat of Henry's car, but the cold had penetrated so deep into her bones that warmth couldn't reach her. Henry drove in silence, but she could see his jaw tight, his eyes checking on her repeatedly in the rearview mirror. "Still with me?" His voice cut through the quiet. Paige tried to answer, but all that came out was a trembling whimper. Henry cursed under his breath, the first crack in his controlled composure, and pressed harder on the accelerator. "Hold on, 5 minutes." The car stopped in front of a high-rise Paige recognized, one of the most expensive buildings in the city. Henry got out and opened her door, but when she tried to move, her legs refused to cooperate. Without hesitation, he scooped her into his arms. "I can walk," Paige protested weakly. "No, you can't." He carried her through the marble lobby, past a doorman who looked surprised but didn't question, straight into a private elevator. When the doors closed, reality finally hit. She was in the arms of a complete stranger, being taken to his apartment. She should be terrified. But all she felt was the warmth of him through her wet clothes, the strength of his arms holding her carefully, and a strange sense of safety. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse. Paige caught a glimpse of floor-to-ceiling windows, sleek minimalist furniture, a perfectly decorated Christmas tree. Henry carried her straight to the bathroom and turned on the shower, adjusting the temperature carefully. "You need a hot shower. Now." He turned to Paige, who was leaning against the sink, still shaking. "Take off the wet clothes. I'll be back with dry ones in 5 minutes. Can you manage?" Paige nodded, but when he closed the door and she tried to remove her coat, her fingers were so numb they could barely grip the zipper. Tears came back. Frustration, exhaustion, complete humiliation. She was pathetic, abandoned, depending on a stranger's charity on Christmas Eve. A soft knock on the door. "Paige, are you all right?" She didn't answer, didn't trust her voice. The door opened slightly. "I'm coming in. Tell me if you're not comfortable." Silence. Henry entered, eyes carefully focused on her face, not her body. When he saw she was still fully dressed, still shaking violently, his expression softened. "Let me help." With surprisingly gentle hands, he unbuttoned her soaked coat, helped her pull it off, then the sweater underneath. He stopped when he reached her blouse, leaving her some dignity. "Can you handle the rest?" Paige nodded. "I'll be right outside. Call if you need me." He left, closing the door. 15 minutes later, Paige emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a fluffy robe 3 times her size. Her hair was damp, her skin finally returning to pink instead of blue. Henry was in the kitchen, making something that smelled like hot chocolate. When he saw her, he stopped. "Better?" "Much," Paige whispered, her voice hoarse. "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't—" She didn't finish. Didn't want to think about it. Henry brought 2 mugs to the living room, gesturing to the couch. Paige sat, pulling the robe tighter. He took the armchair across from her, keeping a respectful distance. "Want to tell me what you were doing freezing to death on Christmas Eve?" The question was gentle but direct. Paige stared at the mug in her hands. She could lie. Should lie. But something about the way Henry looked at her, without judgment, without pity, just genuine interest, made the words spill out. "My boyfriend was supposed to pick me up. He didn't come. My phone died. My wallet was stolen on the subway. I had nowhere to go." Her voice broke. "And I think he just didn't care enough to show up." The silence that followed was heavy. Then Henry spoke, and there was a current of anger in his voice that made Paige look up. "What kind of man leaves his girlfriend freezing alone on Christmas Eve?" It wasn't really a question. Paige laughed, a bitter, joyless sound. "The kind who never really loved me, I guess." And somehow, saying it out loud to a stranger was both liberating and devastating. Paige woke up disoriented. For a moment, she didn't recognize where she was. The room was too big, the bed too soft, The light streaming through the windows illuminated skyscrapers, not her usual view of a dirty alley. Then it all came back. The snow. Henry. The penthouse. She sat up quickly, panic rising in her chest. What time was it? How long had she slept? She was wearing a t-shirt that clearly belonged to Henry, enormous on her, smelling of masculine soap, and something indefinable that made her stomach do strange flips. A soft knock on the door. Paige, are you awake? Henry's voice. Can I come in? Yes, she managed. Henry entered carrying a tray, coffee, toast, scrambled eggs. Thought you might be hungry. He placed the tray on the bed carefully, keeping a respectful distance. In daylight, Paige really saw him for the first time. He was younger than she'd initially thought, maybe late 20s, early 30s. Handsome in an aristocratic way, with those gray eyes that seemed to see right through her. What time is it? She asked, grabbing the coffee gratefully. Noon. You slept almost 12 hours. Your body needed it. He sat in the chair near the window. How are you feeling? Better, embarrassed. Paige couldn't meet his eyes. I'm so sorry for invading your Christmas like this. You probably had plans and… I didn't, Henry interrupted gently. I was coming back from a boring business dinner when I saw you, and I'm grateful I did. Paige finally looked at him. Why? Because no one should be alone and freezing on Christmas Eve, and because… He hesitated, as if weighing his words. Something about you made me stop the car. Normally I would have just called emergency services and kept driving, but I couldn't leave you there. The air between them grew heavy with something Paige couldn't name. Her phone, which Henry had put on charge overnight, suddenly rang on the nightstand. She picked it up, saw the name on the screen, and felt her stomach sink. Marcus. 17 missed calls, 23 messages. She opened the most recent one. Where the hell are you? I went to pick you up this morning and you weren't there. This is ridiculous, Paige. Call me now. Paige felt rage, pure, incandescent rage, burn through her. He went to get her this morning, 12 hours later, after she'd spent the entire night in the cold. Everything okay? Henry's voice brought her back. Paige looked at him. This man who was essentially a stranger, but who had shown more care in 12 hours than Marcus had in 2 years. It's him. Marcus. He finally showed up. This morning. Her voice trembled with suppressed emotion. 12 hours too late. Henry said nothing. Just waited. And somehow that silence gave Paige courage. She dialed Marcus's number. He answered on the first ring. Hello? Marcus, it's me. It's Paige. A pause. Paige, whose phone are you using? That's what you're asking? Her voice cracked. You were supposed to pick me up last night, 12 hours ago. I was waiting in the snow. My phone died. Where were you? Another pause, longer this time. Then Marcus sighed, actually sighed, like she was inconveniencing him. Look, babe, something came up. The guys wanted to hit the bar for Christmas Eve. I figured you'd just grab an Uber or something. The room tilted. He hadn't forgotten. He had chosen a bar over her. Chosen his friends over making sure she was safe. I didn't have my wallet, Paige whispered. It was stolen. Well, how was I supposed to know that? Marcus's tone shifted to defensive. You're always so independent. I thought you'd figure it out. Are you seriously calling me now to guilt-trip me about this? Paige looked at Henry. His expression was cold, controlled fury. We're done, Marcus. The words came out steady, final. Don't call me, don't text me, we're done. What? Paige, come on, don't be dramatic. She ended the call. Her hands were shaking. She had just ended a 2-year relationship in 30 seconds. She should feel regret, should feel fear, but all she felt was light, as if she'd released a weight she'd been carrying for years. Are you okay? Henry asked gently. Paige looked at him, really looked, at the way he watched her with genuine concern, at how he maintained respectful distance even in his own apartment, at how he'd stopped the car last night when everyone else simply passed by. I don't know, she admitted honestly, but I think I will be. The smile Henry gave her was small, but it completely transformed his face. Good. Because I made Christmas turkey. Too much for one person, and it would be a shame to waste it. There was an implicit invitation there. Spend Christmas Day together. Two strangers connected by a moment of need. Paige knew she should leave, should go back to her small apartment, process everything that had happened. But when Henry stood and extended his hand, that gesture that was becoming familiar, she took it. Christmas turkey sounds perfect. And as he led her to the living room where the tree glowed and the city stretched endlessly beyond the windows, Paige thought that maybe, just maybe, being abandoned in the snow was the best thing that had ever happened to her, because it brought her here, to Henry. And something about that felt terrifyingly right. You cook? Paige couldn't hide her surprise as she watched Henry move through the kitchen with practiced efficiency. He was wearing jeans and a casual sweater, the first time she'd seen him without a suit, and there was something disarmingly normal about the scene. Henry laughed. You thought I ordered everything? You live in a penthouse in the most expensive building in the city, Paige pointed out, gesturing at the space around them. People like you usually have personal chefs. Usually I do, he admitted, seasoning something on the stove. But I gave the staff the holidays off, and I like cooking. It's calming. There was a story there, Paige felt. But before she could ask, the oven timer went off. Dinner was surreal. They ate at the elegant dining table, snow still falling softly outside, the entire city wrapped in festive silence. Henry was an excellent cook. The turkey was perfect, the sides delicious. But what really surprised Paige was the conversation. They talked about everything and nothing. Henry told her about growing up an only child to absent parents, building a business empire in his 20s as a way to prove his worth. Renford Industries, he said when Paige asked. Medical technology. We develop equipment that saves lives. There was pride in his voice, but also something else. Loneliness, perhaps. And you? He asked. What do you do when you're not being abandoned in the snow? Paige laughed, though the question still stung. I work at a bookstore. Nothing glamorous, but I love books. I love how they can transport you anywhere, let you be anyone. Escapism, Henry observed. Not judgment, just understanding. Sometimes the real world is too much. Sometimes, Paige agreed softly. For a moment, their eyes met across the table, and there was an understanding there. Two strangers discovering they might not be so strange to each other after all. After dinner, they moved to the living room. Henry turned on the fireplace with a remote control, and Paige couldn't help but laugh. Of course you have a remote control fireplace. Are you mocking my technology? There was humor in his voice. A little. They sat on the couch, not close, but not far either. Paige picked up one of the photos on the side table. It was Henry, younger, with a beautiful dark-haired woman. Your mother? She was. Henry's voice grew quieter. She died 5 years ago. Cancer. Paige immediately regretted asking. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have. No, it's okay. Henry took the photo, looking at it with nostalgia. She was incredible. Always said I worked too much, that I needed to find someone to share my life with. He laughed without humor. I think she'd be disappointed I'm still alone. Why are you? The question came out before Paige could think better of it. Sorry, that's not my business. Because it's easier, Henry answered honestly. Relationships require vulnerability, trust, and in my world, trust is dangerous currency. He looked at her. But you understand that, don't you? That's why you stayed with Marcus, even when he clearly didn't value you. Because being alone seemed scarier than being with the wrong person. The words hit Paige like a punch. Because he was right. Absolutely right. How do you know that? Paige whispered. Henry studied her for a long moment. Because I recognize it. That wound of not feeling enough, of seeking external validation because the internal is broken. He leaned slightly closer. But can I tell you something I learned building a company from nothing? Paige nodded, unable to speak. You don't need someone to make you whole. You're already whole. You just need to believe it. Tears burned in Paige's eyes. No one had ever said anything like that to her. No one had ever seen her like this. Henry, you're stronger than you think, Paige. Last night, in the cold, you didn't give up. Today, you ended a relationship that was destroying you. That's courage. He wiped away a tear that escaped. The touch was brief, but it set every nerve in her body on fire. Don't diminish yourself just because someone was too stupid to see your worth. The silence that followed was charged. Paige was acutely aware of how close they were now, how his warmth seemed to fill all the space between them. I should go, she said suddenly, standing up. Because if she stayed one more minute, she'd do something stupid, like lean in and find out if his lips were as soft as they looked. Henry stood too. Do you have somewhere to go? The question was gentle but direct, and Paige realized her apartment was tiny, cold, full of memories of Marcus. The idea of going back there today felt unbearable. I have an apartment. That's not what I asked. Henry studied her. Stay, at least tonight. I have plenty of rooms, and tomorrow, if you want to leave, I won't stop you. Paige knew she should refuse, but when she looked around at the warm apartment, at the glowing tree, at Henry watching her with those gray eyes that made her heart race, she realized she didn't want to go. Not yet. Okay, she whispered. One more night. And the smile Henry gave her, it was worth every second of uncertainty. Paige woke to the smell of coffee and something sweet baking. For a disoriented moment, she thought she was home with her grandmother, those rare, precious mornings when Eleanor made pancakes. Then reality settled in. She was in Henry's penthouse. Again. She should have left yesterday, but she hadn't. And now it was her third morning here, and something about that should feel strange, but it didn't. It was terrifyingly comfortable. She came downstairs to find Henry in the kitchen, wearing a suit this time, clearly ready for work. Good morning, he said, pouring coffee for her without asking. He'd already learned how she liked it. Milk, 1 sugar. I made waffles. I hoped you'd like them. They ate at the kitchen counter, a surprisingly domestic morning routine. Do you have to work today? Paige asked. Board meeting at 10. Unfortunately, business empires don't run themselves. There was a touch of regret in his voice. What will you do? Go back to my apartment, I guess. Look for my old phone that might still work. See if I can recover my wallet. The prospect felt exhausting. Henry was quiet for a moment, then set down his fork. I have a proposal for you. Something about the way he said it made Paige's heart race. What? Stay here. Not just today. Stay until you get back on your feet. Until you recover your wallet. Stabilize things. Paige blinked. Henry, I can't. Why not? He turned on his stool to face her. You need a place. I have plenty of space. It doesn't make sense for you to go back to an apartment that reminds you of someone who hurt you when you could stay here. I barely know you, Paige protested, though something inside her was screaming to say yes. And you barely know me. I could be, I don't know, a freeloader or something. Henry laughed, a genuine sound that completely transformed his face. Paige, you thanked me 5 times yesterday for making dinner. You washed the dishes even after I told you not to. You're the least freeloader-ish person I know. He grew serious. Look, I know this is unconventional, but there's something about you. I can't explain it. But since I found you at that station, my apartment doesn't feel so empty. And maybe we both benefit from not being alone this Christmas. Paige's heart was beating so hard she was certain he could hear it. What if people talk? What if they think that we care what strangers think? Henry interrupted gently. Paige, I built $1 billion company. Trust me, people always talk. I learned not to listen. He waited, giving her space to process. No pressure. If you want to leave, I'll call a car and make sure you get home safely. But if you want to stay, the offer's open, for as long as you need. Paige looked around, at the apartment that had become a refuge, at the city sparkling outside, at Henry watching her with careful hope. She thought about her cold apartment full of bad memories, thought about spending the next few days alone, picking up the pieces, and then she thought about staying here, where for the first time in years she felt seen. "Okay," she said, before she could convince herself otherwise. "I'll stay, but temporarily, and I'll pay rent as soon as—" Henry shook his head. "No rent. You can keep me company at dinner. That's payment enough." He extended his hand, that gesture that was becoming their ritual. "So we have a deal?" Paige took his hand. The touch sent electricity up her arm. "We have a deal." Henry smiled, and there was something in his eyes that made Paige's stomach flip. "Good, because I need to confess something." "What?" Paige was suddenly nervous. "I kind of already put your clothes in the wash yesterday when you were sleeping, and I bought some basics I thought you might need. Toothbrush, shampoo, those things." He looked almost embarrassed. "I hope you don't mind." Paige couldn't help but laugh. "You were that sure I'd stay?" "No, I was hopeful." The raw honesty of those words stole her breath. They stood there, hands still clasped, eyes locked, and something passed between them. A promise, a beginning, a fundamental shift. Then Henry's phone rang, breaking the moment. He cursed under his breath, checking the screen. "My assistant. I need to go." But before leaving, he leaned in and kissed the top of her head, a gesture so natural yet so intimate, it made Paige's heart stop. "See you at dinner?" "See you at dinner," she confirmed, her voice barely above a whisper. And when he left, Paige stood alone in the enormous apartment, realizing that in 3 days, her life had completely turned upside down. She'd gone from abandoned in the snow to living with a billionaire. And the scariest part? It felt absolutely right. The intercom buzzed at 3 in the afternoon, while Paige was curled up on the couch reading one of the many books from Henry's library. She hesitated. It wasn't her place to answer. But when it buzzed again, insistently, she stood and pressed the button. "Yes?" "Where is Henry Renford?" The voice was female, sharp, commanding. "This is his apartment." Paige froze. "He's at work. Can I help you?" "You can let me up. Now." Something in the voice made Paige obey instinctively. She pressed the button to release the elevator, then ran to check herself in the mirror. Messy hair, wearing leggings, and one of Henry's t-shirts she'd borrowed. Great. Just great. The elevator opened and a woman stepped out. Tall, slim, designer dress, impeccable blonde hair, beautiful in an intimidating way. Her eyes swept over Paige from head to toe, and the disapproval was palpable. "Who are you?" the woman asked, without preamble. "And what are you doing in Henry's apartment wearing his clothes?" Paige felt her face heat. "I'm a friend. My name is Paige." "A friend?" The woman laughed, a humorless sound. "Henry doesn't have friends. He has business associates and women who stay one night." She removed her coat, tossing it on the couch as if she owned the place. "So which are you?" "I'm sorry, but who are you?" Paige found the courage to ask. The woman raised an eyebrow. "Victoria Ashford, Henry's fiancée." Paige's world stopped. "Excuse me?" "Well, ex-fiancée," Victoria corrected with a casual wave of her hand. "We broke up 6 months ago, but Henry and I have history. And after thinking about it over the holidays, I realized I made a mistake. I came to get him back." She studied Paige with sharp eyes. "And you, whoever you are in my way." Paige's phone was in her hands before she realized it, dialing Henry. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Paige, is everything okay?" "Henry, there's a woman here, Victoria. She says she's your ex-fiancée." The silence on the line was deafening. Then, quietly, "Damn, I'm coming home now. Don't let her intimidate you, I'll explain everything." Victoria had clearly heard the conversation. She smiled, predatory. "He didn't tell you about me." There was satisfaction in her voice. "How interesting. Let me guess. He found you in some sad situation, played the white knight, and now you think there's something special between you? Every word was a knife, because that was exactly what had happened. I've known Henry for 10 years, Victoria continued, circling Paige like a predator. We grew up in the same circles. I understand his world, his ambitions, his needs. You? She laughed. You're a Christmas charity project. Once the novelty wears off, he'll realize we're meant for each other. Paige felt nausea rising, because Victoria was just voicing her own fears, that this was too good to be true, that Henry would realize she didn't belong in this world. Leave. Paige's voice was firmer than she felt. Henry told you to go. Did he say that? Victoria challenged. Or are you assuming? Before Paige could answer, the elevator opened. Henry practically ran out, tie loose, face flushed as if he'd been running. His eyes went immediately to Paige, checking if she was okay, before turning to Victoria. What are you doing here? His voice was cold as ice. I came to see you, obviously, Victoria said, her voice softening to something almost seductive. Henry, darling, we need to talk. About us. About the mistakes I made. There is no us, Henry said firmly. There hasn't been for 6 months. You broke up with me by text, remember? Because you decided I was emotionally unavailable. And I was wrong. Victoria moved closer, completely ignoring Paige. I shouldn't have given up so easily. We were good together, Henry. You know that. She placed her hand on his chest. Come back to me. Henry removed her hand gently but firmly. No. One word. Definitive. But Victoria didn't give up. Is it because of her? She pointed at Paige. That lost girl you took in like an abandoned puppy. Henry, be serious. She doesn't belong in your world. In a week, you'll get tired of playing savior. Paige felt every word like a punch, because there was truth there. She didn't belong in this world of penthouses and designer clothes and women like Victoria, who were raised for this. Leave. Henry's voice was low, dangerous. Now, before I call security. Henry. Now. The shout echoed through the apartment. Victoria stepped back, surprised. She'd never seen him like this. Uncontrolled. Emotional. She grabbed her coat, walking to the elevator with wounded dignity. But before entering, she looked back. She'll disappoint you, Henry. And when she does, I'll be here. The doors closed. Silence. Henry turned to Paige, who was trembling, not from cold, but from adrenaline and fear and doubt. Paige, I'm so sorry. I didn't know she would come. We broke up months ago and... Is she right? Paige interrupted, her voice breaking. Am I just a charity project? Will you get tired of me and realize she was better? Henry closed the distance between them in 3 steps, holding her face between his hands. Listen to me very carefully. Victoria was convenient. Our families knew each other. She understood the business world. But it was never real. It never felt... He searched for the words. It never felt like you feel. And then he kissed her. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was desperate, urgent, loaded with 3 days of unresolved tension. Henry's lips moved against hers hungrily, like he was dying of thirst and she was water. Paige gasped, and he took advantage, deepening the kiss. One hand tangled in her hair, the other firm on her back, pulling her closer. She should push him away, should demand explanations. But all she could do was melt against him, her arms rising to wrap around his neck, returning the kiss with equal fervor. Because for the first time in her life, Paige was being kissed like she was precious, like she was chosen. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. Henry rested his forehead against hers, eyes still closed. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have... Don't apologize. Paige's voice came out hoarse. Please don't apologize. They stayed like that for a long moment, breaths mixing, heart against heart. Then Henry pulled back slightly, enough to look into her eyes. I need to tell you about Victoria. He guided her to the couch, but kept her hand in his, as if afraid she might disappear if he let go. We've known each other for years. Our families always expected we'd end up together. When we started dating 2 years ago, it was easy, convenient. She understood the expectations, the public appearances, the business dinners. He laughed without humor. But it was never love. It was a partnership. And deep down, we both knew it. What happened? Paige asked gently. I was working too much. Like always. Had a major deal closing and I was at the office until midnight every night for weeks. One night I came home and she'd packed her bags. Said she couldn't compete with my company, that I was incapable of real emotional connection. He looked at their joined hands. And the saddest part? I felt relief, not sadness, relief. Paige squeezed his hand. And now she's back. And now she's back, Henry confirmed. But Paige, you need to understand. I don't want Victoria. I didn't even before I met you. He turned his body to face her completely. And then I saw you. At that station, freezing, alone. But there was still something intact in you. Something beautiful the world hadn't completely broken. And I knew. Knew what? Paige whispered. That I was in trouble. Henry laughed, half nervous, half amazed. Because in 3 days you did what Victoria couldn't in 2 years. You made this apartment feel like home. You made me want to leave the office early just to have dinner with you. You reminded me there's more to life than business deals and board meetings. Paige felt tears burning. Henry, I'm not saying I'm in love with you, he continued quickly. That would be ridiculous. It's been 3 days. But I am saying there's something here, something real. And I want to see where it can lead, if you want. Paige's heart was beating so hard she could barely think. Every rational part of her was screaming to go slow, to protect herself, to remember that 3 days wasn't enough to know someone. But then she thought about Marcus, who she'd known for 2 years and never really saw her. And she looked at Henry, who in 3 days knew her better than Marcus ever did. I'm scared, she admitted honestly. Scared this is too good to be true. Scared I'll wake up and find it was just temporary Christmas fantasy. Henry held her face gently. Then let's find out together. Slowly. No pressure. But Paige... He brushed his thumb across her lower lip. I kissed you because I couldn't not kiss you anymore. And if you let me, I'll kiss you again. And again. Until you have no doubt this is real. Before Paige could respond, her phone rang. The number was unknown. She hesitated, but something made her answer. Hello? Paige Morgan? A formal female voice. Yes? This is St. Mary's Hospital. Your grandmother, Eleanor Morgan, was admitted to the emergency room an hour ago. She gave us your name as her contact. Could you come as soon as possible? The world stopped. Grandmother. The only family she had. What happened? Is she okay? The doctor will explain when you arrive. But it's serious, Miss Morgan. The phone slipped from Paige's hand. Henry caught it, processing the situation instantly. The hospital? Your grandmother? Paige nodded, unable to speak, panic rising in suffocating waves. I need to go, now. But I don't have a car and public transportation at this hour. She was hyperventilating. Henry pulled her into his arms, firm but gentle. Breathe. We'll figure this out. He grabbed his phone. Richard, I need the car. Now. Emergency. He hung up and looked at Paige. We're going together. I'll take you. You don't have to. I know. Henry kissed her forehead. But I'm going anyway, because you shouldn't be alone in this. Not anymore. And as they rushed to the elevator, Paige realized something. In 3 days, Henry hadn't just become a refuge from the cold. He'd become someone she could trust. Someone who showed up. For the first time in her life, she wasn't facing a crisis alone. And that changed absolutely everything. The hospital hallway smelled of disinfectant and despair. Paige paced back and forth in front of the intensive care unit, her nails digging into her palms so hard they left crescent-shaped marks. 15 minutes. It had been 15 minutes since the doctor went in to examine her grandmother, and every second felt like an eternity. Henry sat in the uncomfortable plastic chairs, watching her with silent concern. Sit down, he said gently. You're going to exhaust yourself. I can't. Paige's voice was thin, brittle. What if I didn't get here in time? What if I was at your apartment living a fantasy while she was here alone, dying? The last word came out as a sob. Henry stood, blocking her path. Stop. Don't do this to yourself. But it's true. Paige was shaking. I should have been with her. I shouldn't have come back to the city. I should have stayed. And then you would have frozen to death at that station. Henry interrupted firmly. Paige, you can't blame yourself for living your life. Your grandmother wouldn't want that. Before Paige could respond, the door opened. A middle-aged doctor came out, removing his surgical gloves. Family of Eleanor Morgan? Paige was beside him in a second. That's me, her granddaughter. How is she? The doctor, Dr. Matthews according to his badge, gestured to the chairs. Let's sit down. Just tell me if she's alive. The panic in Paige's voice was palpable. She's alive, the doctor confirmed quickly. But she's very weak. She had a stroke. Small, but at 82, any stroke is serious. Paige felt her legs give out. Henry caught her, guiding her to a chair. What's the prognosis? Henry asked when Paige couldn't. The doctor sighed. Hard to say. The next 48 hours are critical. If she makes it through, recovery will be slow. Physical therapy, possibly speech therapy if there's language damage. She'll need constant care. Can I see her? Paige finally found her voice. Briefly. But she's sedated. She may not recognize you. Paige's grandmother looked tiny in the hospital bed, surrounded by beeping machines and snaking tubes. Her skin was translucent as tissue paper, her white hair spread across the pillow. Paige sat in the chair beside the bed, taking her grandmother's frail hand. Grandma? It's me. Paige. She waited, but there was no response. Tears began falling silently. I'm so sorry. Sorry I wasn't here. Sorry for... Henry was behind her, hands resting gently on her shoulders. She knows you love her. How can you be sure? Paige whispered. Because my mother knew, Henry said softly. Even when I was working too much and didn't visit for weeks. Even when I chose business over time with her. She knew. And your grandmother knows too. Suddenly, Eleanor's fingers squeezed weakly. Her eyes opened slowly, cloudy, disoriented, but conscious. Paige. The voice was weak, scratchy. I'm here. Paige held her hand tighter. I'm right here, Grandma. Eleanor smiled faintly. My girl. Did you find someone? Her eyes went to Henry. Is he good? Paige laughed through tears. Yes, he's good. Good. Eleanor closed her eyes again, exhausted. You deserve to be happy. Deserve to be loved. Her breathing slowed, falling back into sleep. The nurse appeared in the doorway. She needs to rest. You can come back tomorrow morning. Back in the car, Paige was absolutely silent. Henry drove, casting occasional worried glances but respecting her space. When they stopped in front of his building, neither of them moved. Thank you, Paige finally said, for coming with me, for staying. You didn't have to. I wanted to, Henry replied simply. Paige, look at me. When she did, there was something intense in his eyes. What your grandmother said, about you deserving to be happy, to be loved, she's right. And he hesitated, as if weighing his next words carefully. I want to be the person who makes you happy, if you'll let me. The air in the car became electrically charged. Paige was acutely aware of how close they were in the confined space, how each of his breaths seemed to synchronize with hers. Henry, this is too fast. We barely know each other, and now my grandmother is in the hospital and I don't even know how I'll pay for the care she needs, and... She was hyperventilating again. Henry held her face gently. Breathe. We'll figure everything out. Together. How? Paige whispered. You heard the doctor. She needs 24-hour care. I work at a bookstore making almost nothing. I can't afford... I'll pay. 2 words. Simple. Devastating. Paige pulled back as if burned. What? No, absolutely not. I can't... Why not? Because. Paige was fighting tears and anger and wounded pride. Because then Victoria would be right. I'd just be a charity project, a lost girl you saved, and Henry kissed her. It was different from the kiss in the apartment. This one was softer, more tender, loaded with promise instead of desperation. When he pulled back, he whispered against her lips, "You're not charity. You're the first real thing that's happened to me in years. And let me take care of you. Not because you need saving, but because I want to. Because when you're happy, I'm happy. It's that simple." Paige was openly crying now. Why? Why do you care so much? Henry wiped her tears with his thumbs. Because in 3 days you showed me there's more to life than building empires. You made me laugh. You made this empty apartment feel like home. You made me want to be someone better. He pressed his forehead to hers. Let me help. Please. And Paige, exhausted and scared and so tired of fighting alone, finally gave in. Okay, she whispered. Okay. But neither of them knew that the next day, everything would change. Because Victoria Ashford didn't give up easily. And when she found out about Paige's sick grandmother, she saw the perfect opportunity to end this once and for all. Paige woke to the smell of burnt pancakes. Not just burnt, carbonized. Smoke billowed from the kitchen and the fire alarm was shrieking. She ran downstairs to find Henry standing in front of the stove, spatula in one hand, staring at what used to be breakfast with absolute defeat. There was flour in his hair, something that might have been egg dripping down the counter, and the pancakes looked like charred hockey pucks. "Don't laugh," he said without looking at her, though there was a touch of self-deprecating humor in his voice. "I'm trying not to," Paige managed, biting her lip. "But Henry, what happened here?" Henry finally turned, and there was something vulnerable in his eyes that made her heart squeeze. "I wanted to make pancakes for you. My grandmother used to make them when I was a kid. I thought it would be special." After opening all the windows and shutting off the alarm, they sat on the kitchen floor laughing. The kind of laughter that releases tension and creates intimacy. "Tell me about your grandmother," Paige asked gently, wiping flour from his hair. Henry was quiet for a moment, eyes distant with memory. "She's the one who raised me, actually. My parents were always traveling, building the company, so Grandma Helen stayed with me. She wasn't the warm, fuzzy type, you know. She was practical, efficient, even stern." He smiled with nostalgia. "But Saturday mornings, without fail, she made pancakes. It was her way of saying, 'I love you,' without the words. And I knew. I always knew." "What happened to her?" Paige asked softly. "She died when I was 15. Sudden stroke. And the last thing she did that morning before she went, was make pancakes." His voice broke slightly. "I never learned the recipe. Never asked. I thought I'd have time. And now..." He gestured at the kitchen disaster. "Now I can't even make basic pancakes without burning down the kitchen." Paige felt tears burning, because she understood. Understood the pain of losing someone who raised you, of memories trapped in simple rituals, of trying to recreate love through food. "Did she have a notebook?" Paige asked suddenly. "Your grandmother. A recipe notebook?" Henry blinked, surprised by the question. "She did. An old blue notebook with flour stains on the pages. She wrote everything in there." "Why? Where is it?" "Somewhere in storage with her things. I never had the courage to go through it all." He looked at Paige, confused where she was going with this. Paige stood, pulling him up with her. "Then let's find it. Today. Now. Let's find your grandmother's pancakes." "Paige, it's Saturday. You don't need to." "I want to," she interrupted firmly. "Henry, you gave me a home when I had none. You gave me safety when I was in danger. You chose me when no one else did." She held his face between her hands. "Let me give you this. Let me help you find a piece of her back." Henry's eyes glistened with unshed tears. He kissed her forehead, that gesture that had become sacred between them. "How do you always know exactly what I need?" 2 hours later, they stood in a cold storage unit across town, surrounded by boxes labeled in careful handwriting. "Grandma Helen's kitchen items," one read. Henry opened it with trembling hands. Inside were old dishes, utensils worn by use, and there at the bottom, a blue notebook stained with decades of love expressed through food. He picked it up reverently, opening it slowly. His grandmother's handwriting filled the pages, recipes written in faded ink, notes in the margins like "Henry loves this" and "add extra chocolate for bad days." When he reached the pancake recipe, Henry stopped completely. There was a note there, in the shaky handwriting of someone already old. "For my Henry. If you're reading this, then I'm already gone. But love never leaves, darling. It's in every pancake, in every meal I made with you in mind. And one day, when you find someone to love, make these pancakes for her. Pass the love forward, your Grandma Helen." Henry was openly crying now. Paige pulled him into her arms, and they stood there in the cold storage unit, holding decades of love contained in yellowed pages. "Let's go home," Paige finally whispered, "and let's make these pancakes together, the right way this time." Henry nodded against her shoulder, unable to speak. But as they left, the notebook pressed against his chest. Something fundamental had changed. Because Paige hadn't just helped him find a recipe. She'd helped him find a piece of himself he thought was lost forever. And in that moment, Henry knew with absolute certainty he was going to marry this woman. The apartment was silent when they returned from storage. The sun was beginning to set, casting golden light through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Henry still held the notebook like treasure, and it was, Paige realized, more precious than anything in his billion-dollar empire. "Ready?" she asked gently, gesturing to the kitchen. Henry looked at her, and there was something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Complete vulnerability. Absolute trust. "With you? I'm ready for anything." They entered the kitchen side by side, and Paige placed the notebook open to the recipe while Henry began gathering ingredients. But his hands were shaking. "Hey!" Paige covered his hands with hers. "I'm here. You're not alone in this." He turned his hands to intertwine his fingers with hers. "Never again, I hope." Making pancakes became a dance. Paige read the instructions. Henry measured ingredients. She mixed the batter while he heated the pan. And for the first time since he'd tried this morning, it worked. The batter had the right consistency. The temperature was perfect. When the first pancake hit the griddle, the smell that filled the kitchen made Henry stop completely. "That's it," he whispered, voice full of wonder. "That's exactly how I remember. That smell." He closed his eyes, letting the memory wash over him. Saturday mornings, sun coming through her kitchen window, her humming while she cooked, and me sitting at the table with my dinosaur book, knowing I was safe, that I was loved, that I was home. When he opened his eyes, there were tears there, but also joy. "Paige, you gave this back to me. You gave me this piece of her back." The first pancake came out perfect, golden, fluffy, exactly as the recipe promised. They made 6 more, working in silent synchronization that felt choreographed by years of practice, despite being their first time. When they finally sat down to eat with maple syrup and butter, Henry took Paige's hand before the first bite. "Thank you, for today, for knowing what I needed before I even knew, for seeing me. You've already given me so much," he continued, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Safety when I was in danger, home when I had none. But this..." He looked at the pancakes, at the notebook, at her. "This is different. You gave me back a part of myself I thought was lost. And it made me realize something." "What?" Paige whispered, her heart beating faster. Henry stood, walking to the bedroom. Paige heard drawers opening. When he returned, he was holding a small velvet box. It wasn't new. The velvet was worn at the edges, the color faded with age. "This belonged to my grandmother," he said, opening the box. Inside was a ring. Simple, vintage, a light blue stone surrounded by small diamonds. It was her engagement ring. My grandfather gave it to her when they were 19, with nothing but dreams. She wore it for 62 years, until the day she died. He took the ring from the box. When she passed, she left this to me in her will, with a note saying, "For the woman who makes my grandson remember there's more to life than business, for the woman who makes him truly smile, for the woman who makes him feel at home." Paige's tears were falling freely now. "Henry, you're that woman, Paige. You make me smile. You make me feel at home. You remind me there's more to life than board meetings and quarterly reports." He knelt right there in the kitchen, between pancakes and memories. "Marry me. Not because it's practical or makes sense. Marry me because in less than 2 weeks you became the most important person in my life. Because I love you. Completely. Irrevocably." Paige couldn't speak. She could only nod, tears blurring everything. Henry slid the ring on, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. As if his grandmother had known decades ago that one day this ring would find Paige. "Yes?" Henry needed confirmation, his voice full of hope and fear and love. "Yes," Paige finally managed. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with an intensity that stole all the air. When they finally separated, both were crying and laughing. "The pancakes are cold," Paige observed between laughs. "I don't care," Henry replied, kissing her again. "We can reheat them, or make new ones. We have the rest of our lives to make pancakes." And there, in the kitchen with his grandmother's notebook open and her ring on Paige's finger, surrounded by the smell of pancakes and promises, they began planning a future. A future built not on empires or fortunes, but on Saturday morning pancakes and always showing up for each other. But first, there was a grandmother in the hospital who needed to hear the good news. And when Paige suggested they visit Eleanor tomorrow morning, bringing fresh pancakes made with Grandma Helen's recipe, Henry knew he'd chosen right. Because Paige didn't just understand family, she understood how to create one. Eleanor was sitting up in the hospital bed when Paige and Henry entered the next morning, carrying a thermal container that exuded the scent of fresh pancakes. Her face lit up. She was visibly stronger, color returning to her cheeks, eyes more alert. "My girl!" Eleanor extended her arms, but then her eyes caught something. The sparkle on Paige's finger, the way Henry kept his hand protectively on her back, the radiant smiles neither could hide. "What happened?" Eleanor asked, but there was knowing in her voice. She already knew. Paige approached the bed, extending her left hand. "Grandma, we're getting married." The silence that followed lasted only a second before Eleanor burst into tears of joy. "Come here, both of you," she ordered, pulling them into an awkward but perfect embrace. "I knew. The moment I saw you together that first night, I knew." She pulled back, holding Paige's face between her trembling hands. "My sweet girl." "You finally found someone who sees you, who chooses you." Then she turned to Henry. "And you, young man, will you take care of her? Always?" "With my life," Henry answered without hesitation. "She's everything." Eleanor nodded, satisfied. "Good. Now show me that ring." When Paige extended her hand, Eleanor gasped. It's a period piece. Victorian, if I'm not mistaken. Beautiful work." "It was my grandmother's," Henry explained, sitting in the chair beside the bed. "Grandma Helen. She passed when I was 15, but she left this for me, for the right woman." "Smart woman," Eleanor said approvingly. "She knew you needed someone special, someone who could soften those harsh businessman edges." She poked Henry gently. "You were so serious when we first met, all business. But now," she smiled, "now you look young, happy, alive." Henry exchanged glances with Paige. "She does that. Makes me remember there's more to life." "Good." Eleanor leaned back on the pillows. "Now, about this wedding, when, where, and more importantly, Can I get out of this hospital in time to be there? Actually, Paige said, looking at Henry for confirmation. We wanted to ask, would you give us your blessing, officially? Eleanor blinked, confused. Darling, I just did. No. Henry intervened gently. We want your blessing to marry soon. Very soon. We don't want to wait months or years. When you're well enough to leave, in weeks, maybe a month, we want to have a small ceremony. Just close family. And we couldn't do it without you there. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears again. You'd wait for me? You'd postpone to make sure I can be there? You're the only family I have, Paige said simply. It wouldn't be a wedding without you. And I learned something recently, Henry added. I learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up, who stays, who loves unconditionally. And you, Eleanor, did that for Paige her whole life. So yes, we'll wait. But hopefully not too long. Eleanor wiped her eyes with her trembling hand. The doctor said I can be discharged in 2 weeks if I keep improving at this rate. Physical therapy for a few more weeks after, so maybe a month. Perfect, Paige replied. That gives us time to plan something small but special. Oh, Henry suddenly remembered. We brought something. He opened the thermal container, revealing pancakes still warm. Made with my grandmother's recipe. Paige helped me find it yesterday. We thought you might like a real breakfast instead of hospital food. Eleanor took a pancake, biting slowly, her eyes closed. Oh, this is delicious. Your grandmother knew how to cook. She did, Henry agreed. And she had good taste in women too, apparently. Left the perfect ring for the perfect person. They spent the entire morning there, eating pancakes, sharing stories, laughing. Eleanor told about Paige as a child, always with her nose in books, always dreaming of love stories that seemed impossible. Henry told about his grandma Helen, about Saturday pancakes and being raised with practical but deep love. And at some point, watching the two most important people in her life connecting, sharing, building bridges between past and future, Paige realized something. She hadn't lost family when she almost lost Eleanor. She'd gained more. She'd gained Henry. And through him, she'd gained the memory of Grandma Helen, gained a broader story of love passed forward. What are you thinking? Henry whispered, when Eleanor dozed off peacefully after lunch, exhausted, but happy. I'm thinking, Paige replied softly, that I used to feel alone, even surrounded by people. But now with you, with Grandma getting better, with your grandmother's memories living through that notebook. She looked at him. Now I feel like I finally have roots, belonging, home. Henry kissed the side of her head. You're my home, Paige, you and Eleanor. And in a month, we'll make it official. A month, Paige repeated, testing the words. It felt simultaneously too far away and too close. Scared? Henry asked. Terrified, Paige admitted. But the good kind of terrified. The kind that means something important is happening. Something important is happening, Henry confirmed. We're building a family. The kind we choose, that we create, that we nurture. And it's going to be perfect. He's right, Paige thought as she watched Eleanor sleeping peacefully. It's going to be perfect. Because for the first time in her life, she wasn't just being chosen. She was choosing too. And that difference changed everything. Christmas Eve again. Exactly 1 year since that night at the train station. But today was completely different. Paige stood in front of the mirror in Eleanor's bedroom. Her grandmother was home now, recovered, walking with only a light cane. Paige wore a simple but beautiful dress. Creamy white, classic cut, nothing extravagant. Eleanor stood behind her, adjusting the veil. Your mother would be so proud, Eleanor whispered, eyes shining with tears. My daughter, your mother, she always wanted you to find true love. And you found it, darling. You really found it. Paige turned, embracing her grandmother. Thank you for everything, for raising me, for loving me when I felt unlovable, for staying. Always, Eleanor promised. Then she smiled mischievously. Now, let's make that boy wait a little longer. Tradition. The ceremony was in a small chapel a few blocks from the apartment. There were only 12 people. Eleanor, two close friends from Henry's college days, Paige's best friend from the bookstore, and a few others who meant something real to both of them. No spectacle, no media, just love. When they arrived at the chapel, it was snowing lightly, exactly like 1 year ago. Paige stopped at the door, watching the flakes fall. "Second thoughts?" Eleanor asked gently. "No," Paige replied immediately. It's snow. Like that night, when everything changed. Life has funny ways of coming full circle, Eleanor observed. Ready? More than ever. The chapel was warm, decorated simply with candles and winter greenery, and there at the front, waiting with the officiant, stood Henry. He wore a dark suit, but no tie, the way Paige liked. And when he saw her walking in, Eleanor at her side as her escort, his face transformed. Pure joy, undeniable love, absolute choice. The ceremony was short, no elaborate vows written weeks before. Instead, the officiant, an old friend of Eleanor's family, invited them to simply speak from the heart. Henry went first. He took Paige's hands, looking directly into her eyes. "Paige, 1 year ago I was driving home on Christmas Eve, thinking about how empty my life was. Success, yes. Money, yes. But empty. And then I saw you, freezing in the snow, and something in me said, stop, this person matters. I didn't know then I was stopping to find my soulmate, my home, my reason." His voice broke slightly. "You taught me that building empires means nothing if I don't have someone to share it with. You turned my apartment into a home. You gave me back memories I thought were lost. You showed me that loving isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing I can do." He squeezed her hands. "So I promise to love you every day, to show up every day, to choose you every day. In Saturday morning pancakes and difficult nights, in successes and failures, in sickness and health, forever." Now it was Paige's turn. She was crying, happy tears she couldn't stop. "Henry, I spent so much time feeling invisible, like I didn't matter, like I was just taking up space in someone else's world. And then you stopped the car. You saw me when no one else did. You chose me when I couldn't even choose myself." She took a deep breath. "You gave me back to myself. You taught me I deserve to be loved. You showed me what it is to be truly seen. And you did all of this while letting me be exactly who I am. Imperfect, scared, ordinary." "You were never ordinary," Henry interrupted softly. Paige smiled through tears. "To you, maybe not. And that's why I promise to love you back, with everything I have. I promise to make pancakes when you're sad. I promise to remind you there's more to life than work. I promise to be your home, just as you are mine, forever." The officiant smiled. "Well, I think that covers everything. By the laws of this state and the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Henry, you may kiss your bride." The kiss was soft, tender, full of promise. When they separated, everyone in the chapel was applauding. Eleanor, loudest of all, tears flowing freely. Afterward, there was a small reception at the apartment. No band, no formal speeches, just people who loved each other gathered, eating good food, sharing stories, celebrating love. At some point, Henry pulled Paige onto the private balcony. It was snowing more heavily now, turning the city into a fairy tale. "Happy?" he asked, pulling her close. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Paige answered honestly. "You know what amazes me?" "What?" 1 year ago, this same night, I was alone, abandoned, freezing, thinking my life was over." She looked at him. "And now I'm here, married to you, with Grandma healthy inside, with a future stretching ahead so bright it almost hurts to look at directly." Henry held her tighter. "You know what I learned this year?" "What?" that sometimes you need to be completely lost to be found, that sometimes the worst moment leads to the best, that sometimes love isn't about grand movie romance. It's about burnt pancakes and hospitals and choosing to stay. They stood there while the snow fell. Two strangers who had become home to each other. "What do we do now?" Paige finally asked. "Now?" Henry smiled. "Now we live. We make pancakes on Saturdays. We visit your grandmother. We build a life together, a life of small, precious moments that add up to something extraordinary." He kissed her forehead. "Now we just love each other. It's that simple and that complicated." Later, after everyone had gone home, after Eleanor had gone to the guest room, after the snow stopped and the city slept, Paige and Henry curled up on the couch. Grandma Helen's blue notebook sat on the coffee table, a place of honor now, filled with recipes they planned to try. The ring on Paige's finger caught the light from the fireplace. "You know what we're doing on our first anniversary?" Henry asked sleepily. "What?" "I'm taking you back to that train station, and we'll stand there for a moment, remembering where it all began. And then I'll bring you home, this home, our home, and make pancakes. Tradition." Paige smiled against his chest. "Can you add extra chocolate?" "For you?" "Always." And there, wrapped together while the fire crackled and the city slept under a fresh blanket of snow, Paige Morgan, now Paige Renford, finally understood what her mother used to say before she died. True love isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up, every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Henry had shown up, in the snow, at the hospital, in burnt pancakes and rediscovered memories, in every small and large moment. And Paige had shown up back, and this mutual showing up, this daily choice to love and be loved, this was everything. This was enough. This was forever. 1 year ago, Paige was abandoned in the snow on Christmas Eve. Today, on that same night, she was home. Truly, completely, perfectly home. And the snow falling outside was no longer a threat. It was a blessing, a reminder. Proof that sometimes the most beautiful endings begin in the most unlikely beginnings.